So I guess we'll start with with Mr. Stashower, and we'll just say, based on your understanding of Mad Men and how the show is, can you talk about whether or not it's true or false in its depiction of how the advertising industry was back then, and then maybe a reason why, and then we'll just go down the row.
Well, like many books and programs before it, Mad Men is an exaggeration. The drinking is exaggerated. The spontaneous, creative home runs are exaggerated. The drinking is exaggerated. The cupidity of all clients is exaggerated. So is the drinking. The disdain for research is exaggerated. I think I mentioned the drinking. The servility of the creative and account staffs is exaggerated, at least in my experience, and the drinking is exaggerated. Finally, the ineptitude of the office politics is exaggerated. Now, all of these things did happen to some of the people some of the time, maybe to all of the people some of the time, but not to all of the people all of the time.
Harvey Schoenig.
Well, I was in Chicago for the late 60s and 70s, and the drinking wasn't exaggerated. As a matter of fact, I was with J. Walter Thompson, and we were in the Wrigley building, and downstairs they had the Wrigley bar and restaurant. And when the agency moved to the Hancock building, the bar literally closed up because there were not enough people to patronize it at the end of the day. There was also, I remember, as a young account executive, that we were told if you had to deal with anybody in the media department, and take no offense if you're in the media department, but in those days, the magazines were very big spenders, and they would take the print buyers and the media people out to lunch every day. And as a result, most of the people in the media department planned their meal around where they were going to lunch. And God forbid if a lunch was canceled, they didn't eat. I mean, it was literally, they didn't have the money, they'd left the money at home with their wife or whatever. So the drinking was prevalent. But the thing that I think was true in the business, as depicted on this show, there were not very many females in very high positions. At J. Walter Thompson, which in the Chicago office is about 400 people, I think he had one senior writer, creative director, and a couple of account people. But it wasn't until probably the late 70s that the females started to rise to the top. And one of the people I worked with, Charlotte Beers, eventually became president of Ogilvy and then headed up Radio of America. Just as an aside, I learned today that shows you how big the Chicago office was. Bill and I were in the Chicago office at the same time, but we didn't know each other. We'd worked on different groups, so you can pick it up from there.
Bill Brokaw. How true is Mad Men?
Oh, it's not true at all. My wife's here. It's really, no, it's, there is drinking, there was sexism. It was a different world than it is today. And I think to a large degree it was a man's world. Charlotte Beers was one of the exceptions, I think, at J. Walter Thompson. I worked at 6 different agencies, which tells you something about me. In a span of about 14 years, I couldn't hold a job. But I think the closest I came to Madison Avenue was at Needham, working with Keith Reinhardt, who went on to become chairman of Omnicom and chairman of the 4As. And Keith was of the highest integrity. He was not a Don Draper from the standpoint of drinking and carousing, but he had those same charismatic qualities, a lot of integrity, brilliant guy. And I also got to work with Mary Wells from Wells Rich Green in New York. They owned the agency I was at in St. Louis, Gardner. And Mary Wells Lawrence, and she became Lawrence because she married Harding Lawrence, who was president of Braniff. And Braniff was their client. So I'm not saying that, necessarily that Mary Wells was sleeping with the client, but in terms of exaggeration. But there were things that went on in the business because I think the business, the way it was compensated was different. And I think there was a little more time to play than there is now. But as far as Mad Men, I think there's, it is somewhat exaggerated, but I think by and large the storyline's true.
Alan Gleason.
Well, my wife's not here. So I mean, I recognize a lot of the people here from those days, and I can tell you that Mad Men, of course, there was sexism, but there was also sex. There was drinking, but there was also drug testing. We tested a lot of them. We were all about the idea, and I think what's the difference, what you're not seeing in Mad Men, which I think is the underlying principle of the show, is the extreme devotion, fear, and loathing of the idea. Can you come up with an idea or not that really is marketable, saleable, the client will buy it, that fits in and you see that show, it's really all around the idea. The main course is always, do we have the idea to sell the client? Do we have the ability to see it through? Do we have the ability to take the client on if it's in their best good? Are we even striving to come up with that brilliant idea that makes it worth going out and getting cracked? So I think Mad Men has it just right in terms of the social aspect of those times. But never think that we were all out drinking and carousing, because if we were, it was just to relieve the pressure from how difficult it was to do well. There were 300 ad agencies in Cleveland when I started mine in 1970. Imagine, that's more agencies than there are employees in the top 5 agencies combined probably. So it was a different time, a different way, and I feel like the opportunity to become Mad Men again is right at your fingertips. I'm so excited for the young people here that have a chance to do what we did, but even better.
Can I just have one little tidbit from the show? And Bill, you may remember, when we were at Thompson, one of the key creative people in the city who left Burnett to come to Thompson was a man named Draper Daniels. And he was the chief creative guy, and I have no doubt that that's who they patterned. He wasn't a John Hamm as far as looks and stature or fooling around, as far as I know, but there was a Draper Daniels who was a key creative person.
Mm-hmm. Based on the, I'm sure that all of you have amazing stories about things that, unbelievable things that the people who are in this industry now wouldn't quite be able to believe. Can you think of a story or a day or an account from your histories that would have like almost came straight from a script? It was so unbelievable and so incredible, and speaks to kind of what things were like back in the day. Go ahead.
Well, I have two. We were all looking for jobs all the time. I know you guys are all happy in your jobs, so that doesn't go on. But at the time, when I was working at Dixon Eaton, I applied for my own job. There was a blind box ad. And it sounded just right for me. They wanted a young, spunky guy, enthusiastic, a decent writer. And so I sent a nice letter. I was a pretty good writer. And I said, I got to get out of this place that I'm in now. They're doing horrible. I don't think they'll make it through the year. And about a week later, Henry Eaton, bless his soul, called me in and asked me how things are going there. I said, I'm very proud of the place. He said, well, how do you explain this? And that, by the way, was the moment that started Gleason Advertising. Because none of these guys were going to hire me.
Well, I can tell you one story when I was working on McDonald's, on Kids McDonald's, and we were doing a commercial out on the West Coast. And back then, 60-second commercials were the way things were being done. And it was a haunted house, and Ronald and the others were knocking on the door. They had to chase the Hamburglar through the house and see if they could get the cheeseburgers from the Hamburglar. Well, when we broke, and at lunchtime, and Ronald's off to the side, and you talk about drinking, and Ronald's off to the side smoking a Camel, and this is the original Ronald McDonald, and here, you know, it kind of destroyed my thought and my perception of who Ronald McDonald was. And then some cute little kids, they couldn't have been more than 5 years old. They kind of happened onto the set in a haunted house. I'm standing next to, Ronald McDonald's name was King Moody. And he looks at the kids and he goes, "What are those fucking kids doing here?" And I'm like, oh my God. And there's a reality that you don't see. And I don't know that exists so much today.
That's why he doesn't talk.
That's why he doesn't talk.
No, forbidden.
Harvey Schoenig.
Well, I just recall one incident I always remember is you had to be there, but one client that I worked on was Gallo Wine. And we would go out to Modesto and present, and you'd walk in a big room, and there was a long table with 7 chairs, and Ernest Gallo sat in the middle, and then by the order of rank, they fanned out from him. And the agency would present, and he would start, and he'd look down that way, and that person would comment, and then he'd go this way and back and forth, and as they commented, he just sat there, and he never said a word. And then when they were all done, he said, "Okay, this is what we're going to do." And it was like it didn't make any difference what they said. He ran the company as he saw fit, and that was it. But the one presentation that I guess has stuck with me, and it's probably a lesson we're all probably guilty of at one time, is I'm a frustrated creative person, as the people will attest from Marcus Thomas. And we were making a presentation to the head of Gillette safety razor, and it was for a razor that's long antiquated. A Techmatic razor was a banned razor, and we decided that we could position it to young people just coming in the shaving market because it was hard to cut yourself. In those days, it was a double-edged razor, and you held it wrong, you just took half your skin off. But we positioned it to young people, and we had a campaign, and because it was a small budget, nobody in the creative department really was that interested. So I worked with a young creative writer, and we came up with what was a great campaign, and we presented it, and I started presenting, and I was so enthusiastic, which is kind of rare for me, but I just kept going on, and finally the head of Gillette Safety, he says, "Harvey, quit while you're ahead." He says, "because if you keep talking, you'll unsell it." And it was a lesson to be learned that you got to kind of look at the audience, and when you've said enough, be quiet, because eventually you'll say the wrong thing and it'll all go downhill.
David Stashower, anything to add?
Well, whenever I was tempted to think that we really knew how to plan things, I thought back to how we got one of our longest and happiest accounts. Phone rang one day, and it was the assistant vice president for publicity for the Cleveland Trust Company. He was the whole department. They didn't do any advertising. And he said, "We need an agency." And he said, "Wonderful, how did you come to us?" "We were going down our list of accounts, and you're the only one that hadn't given up on us." So I went over to see him, and he said, "Going to take you to see George Gund. And what we want you to do is prove that television won't work for us. Apparently, he had been taking some kidding at the Union Club, and one day he decided, I'll show him that I was right. I'll do some advertising, it won't do any good. That'll be the end of it. The budget for that first 13 weeks for media and production was $5,000. $35 years later, the budget was $5 million. But if we hadn't been the only agency on their account list, we never would have been a part of that. So much for strategic planning.
Okay.
I want to share one more quick story about the experience I had working with Mary Wells Lawrence at Wells Rich Green. I was flown in with other creative teams from around the country to work on a Philip Morris special project, a special assignment. Leo Burnett had the majority of the Philip Morris brands. At that time, Wells Rich Green had one or two. And so we were briefed. It was very serious. An Australian account group supervisor came in and gave us the lowdown, gave us the spiel on who the market was. And this was for a new product that we had a chance to name, come up with the packaging, come up with the brand positioning. And it was huge. And then Mary Wells Lawrence, very attractive. At that time, she was probably in her 50s. She came in and pair of slacks, and she's fumbling with her hands, and she's talking to the art directors and the writers who were there. And she said, oh, by the way, I just want to let you know, and this was in the 70s, the writer art director team that comes up with a new product that's on the market for 1 year, and if we beat out Leo Burnett, each one of you will get $150,000. That's the way money was thrown around back then. There was the margins were higher. There was a lot of funny money to play with, and it was a very memorable experience. She went on, by the way, in the 60s to become the first CEO, female CEO, on Madison Avenue.
And did you get that account?
No, we didn't. Actually, Leo Burnett got it.
What was the product?
It was the product. I think it was North Winds was the cigarette, and it was only out for a short time.
These
But
guys-
I never worked so hard.
You guys are talking about some very famous people, Charlotte Beers, who I knew very well. But I'm constrained to demonstrate that I'm not a country hick. I mean, at least not country. Mary Wells stole the creative part of our biggest account once, and because she was hot stuff. And I'm happy to say that we got it back. So we had here our share of triumphs, but that kind of competition was a severe problem in those days.
Competition was deadly back then. When I started, we were a little agency with, I had $80 to my name when we started, and my first client was Cleveland Orthopedic Company. So I deal with smaller names than these guys, and they paid me $300 a month. I quit my job. Well, I actually got fired from my job, but I like to think I quit. And I started out with $300 and $500 a month clients. The reason why is because it was below the radar of the real legends, the legendary agencies in Cleveland. And things changed when I started bumping into Wise Advertising and Liggett people all over. Every time I'd go visit a car dealer, they'd be coming out of the same door. And I thought, this business is getting to be trouble. Things had to change in this business. We had to become masters of media and tactics at the same time, which is, I think, where we find you guys today. I'm a little worried that we have a lot of tactics and not a lot of breakthrough ideas, considering all the clutter that's going on right now. But back then, We had to have big ideas, and our life, every day of our life, was can we come up with that idea today? And you'd go to bed and night, damn, I don't have it. Tomorrow, more drugs, more women, more liquor, more anything you could possibly do. So we weren't having fun back then. It was miserable. Is it miserable today? Nobody's willing to say because your bosses are all around you, right? Well, it was a hard business back then, so it's no wonder that we were behaving the way that we were behaving. What were you going to do? It was ruthless and it was tough. But greatest ideas in the history of advertising came out of Cleveland, Ohio, from these amazing agencies. And if it wasn't for guys like these three, I would have never, ever found my way to make myself into anything here. I want to applaud them. These are the real legends of advertising.
And on that note, I'd like to open up the floor to questions from any of you. I've told our panelists that they don't necessarily have to answer every question in the interest of getting more questions. So if you have something directed toward a particular person, you're welcome to say so. If you could stand up so we could all hear you.
Sure. I'd like to hear, what was the worst pitch you ever did?
Anyone? Bill?
I did. In Chicago, I was asked, along with another art director, for new business to develop advertising for Avon, and at a Needham's New York office. And we developed what I thought, in the 70s it was Jingle City. I mean, I seemed to be writing a jingle every other day. But we developed, I thought, a very touching, emotional campaign for Avon. And the theme was From One Woman to Another Avon. And we went to New York, we presented it to the team there, and they loved it. Presented it to the prospect, and they were very defensive and said, "We're sorry, this is a great campaign, but we have men that sell Avon now," and they immediately killed it. So we didn't get the business. And that was embarrassing. That's where you really have to know your target audience and who you're talking to and why, and that continues today.
One of the clients I worked on was Alberto Culver. And Culver in those days, early on in television, they were one of the biggest TV advertisers. They spent 35 cents of every dollar in sales on television advertising. Anyhow, we had a new product, actually a flanker, a VO5 shampoo, that they wanted to come out with. You could use it a lot, whatever. So we positioned it to the frequent shampooer, which we determined was the young female. And we did a whole elaborate print campaign. It was a beautiful campaign. And we took it into Leonard Lavin, who had made his fortune on television. And I started going through the thing and the rationale, and we got this great print campaign. He says, "Absolutely not. I don't believe in print. I don't know why you wasted your time to come here with print. And if you don't have anything else to show me, then you might as well go." And I was flabbergasted. I just went to name that building. I said, "Here's Ralph Rydholm with the creative." And so Ralph stood up and went through his song and dance. And actually, it all turned out well. They did buy the campaign and ran it.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Alan, I remember you for a bunch of things, but probably most memorable was that campaign. And remind me whether it was about how my advisor told me to fire myself